I've learned that desperation has a specific smell. It's a mix of stale instant noodles, damp carpet, and the hot ozone scent of a laptop that's been running for 72 hours straight while you scroll through job boards that don't want you. I'd been out of work for 6 months. My savings hadn't just dried up, they'd evaporated, leaving behind a bitter crust of debt. When you're in that hole, you stop looking for a career. You start looking for a lifeline. The phone vibrated on the coffee table, buzzing like an angry hornet. It was Jax. Jax is the kind of friend who always has a connection, usually the type that involves moving unmarked crates at 3 a.m. But I was past the point of being picky. "Elias, tell me you're sitting down," Jax's voice crackled. He sounded like he'd just won the lottery. "I just got off the horn with my cousin. He works HR for the mall. You know it, right?" "The mall?" I rubbed my eyes, the lids feeling like sandpaper. "Yeah, Jax. Everyone knows that mall. I can't afford the air they pump into that place." "Well, they're hiring. Night security. $55 an hour, Elias. And that's just the base." I stopped rubbing my eyes. My heart gave a jagged little thump. 55? To walk around a mall with a flashlight? What's the catch? Is the building made of asbestos? "No catch," Jax said, though his voice dropped a pitch. "The guy who had the shift before you, he just quit. Walked off mid-shift, left his radio, his keys, even his car in the lot. Management is panicking. They need a body in a uniform tonight. Can you be there by 9? "I'll be there at 8:30, I said. The mall wasn't like those dying malls you see in abandoned photo essays. This place was the beating heart of the state's economy. It was a palace of light and excess. As I walked through the main entrance, I was hit by a wall of sensory overload. The air was chilled to a perfect 68 degrees and smelled of expensive sandalwood, roasted coffee, and the faint, sweet tang of industrial-grade air purifiers. It was December 23rd. The holiday rush was in full swing. A 3-story Victorian Christmas tree dominated the central atrium, draped in enough gold leaf and crystal to buy my apartment building. A choir was singing somewhere on the second mezzanine. It was bright. It was loud. It was the picture of perfect American prosperity. I felt like a grease stain on a silk sheet in my thrift store suit. I found the office tucked behind a boutique that sold watches worth more than my life. Miller looked like he was vibrating on a frequency of pure stress. His tie was loose, and he was nursing a cup of black coffee like it was the only thing keeping his soul attached to his body. "Elias?" he asked, not looking up from a stack of spreadsheets. "Yes, sir. Jack sent me." "Good. You're tall. You look like you can follow instructions." Miller finally looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't look at me so much as he looked through me. "It's a simple job. Patrolling. Making sure the teenagers don't hide in the vents after hours." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a heavy ring of keys, a digital radio, and a small, square piece of white paper, folded twice. "The rules," Miller said, sliding the paper toward me. "Read it when the doors lock," Miller whispered. His voice had gone from professional to jagged. "Not before. People are still watching. Just do your rounds. Don't lose that paper." I shrugged. I figured it was standard liability stuff. Don't slip on wet floors. Don't use the freight elevator. I was more interested in the $55 an hour. 10 o'clock, Miller said, standing up. That's when the shoppers leave. From then until 6 a.m., the mall belongs to you. The transition was violent. 1 minute, the mall was a cacophony of human life. The next, it was a tomb. The silence didn't just fall. it crashed. I stood in the center of the atrium, my boots echoing on the marble floors. Without the crowds, the scale of the place felt oppressive. I pulled the radio from my belt. Chirp. Base to Elias. You there? It was Miller, speaking from the remote security hub. I'm here, I said. Good. Start your first round in the fashion wing. And Elias? Read the paper now. I looked at the first line. Rule 1. Never look at the mannequins. If you break this rule and make eye contact, you must immediately say, I apologize, greetings to Santa. I stared at the list. I actually laughed. It was the kind of laugh you have when you realize your friend spent way too much time planning a prank. Greetings to Santa? Was this some kind of psychological hazing for the new guy? Pathetic, I muttered. I looked at the fashion wing stretching out before me. It was a long, curved corridor lined with boutiques, and of course, the mannequins. They were everywhere, dozens of them. Some were hyper-realistic, with molded hair and painted features. Others were the modern kind, headless, smooth, and ghostly white. I decided to test the waters. I wanted to see if Miller was watching the cameras, waiting for me to play along like a fool. I walked up to a shop window. Inside, 3 mannequins stood in a triangle. They were wearing shimmering evening gowns. One of them, a blonde with a fixed porcelain smile, was positioned as if she were mid-laugh. I stopped. I squared my shoulders. I looked her directly in her painted glass eyes. Nice dress, I said, my voice echoing in the empty hall. I stared for 10 seconds, 20. I expected a jump scare, a loud noise, something, but the mall remained silent. Rules, I snorted, turning away. Grown men playing games. I took 5 steps down the hall. The sound was sharp, like a dry branch snapping. I stopped. I didn't turn around at first. My skin began to crawl. That instinctual lizard brain alarm went off, the one that tells you a predator is standing right behind you. Slowly, I turned my head. I didn't scream, but the air left my lungs in a sharp hiss. I panned my flashlight down the hallway. A wave of pure, cold nausea hit me. It wasn't just the 3 in the boutique. Every mannequin in the fashion wing, the ones in the sportswear kiosks, the ones sitting on benches, had turned. Some were 20 yards away, some were 50, but every single head was pivoted toward my position. Hundreds of pairs of painted, vacant eyes were locked onto mine. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the weight of their attention. I could almost hear them, a high-pitched plastic creaking that vibrated in the back of my skull. I fumbled for the paper in my pocket. My fingers were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. Rule 1. If you break this rule, I apologize, I whispered. My voice sounded thin, like a child's. I cleared my throat and tried again, louder, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. I apologize. Greetings to Santa. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the sound. It was the sound of heavy plastic dragging across polished marble. All at once, in a synchronized mechanical motion, every mannequin in the wing snapped its head back to its original position. I stood there for a long time, my heart slamming against my ribs. Mechanical, I whispered, but I didn't believe it. It's just high-tech hydraulics. Miller is just messing with me. I wiped the sweat from my eyes. The smell of the mall had changed. The sandalwood and coffee were gone. Now it smelled like cold, dry dust, and something else, something sweet. I looked down at the paper again. Rule 1 was behind me. I turned my flashlight toward the center of the atrium. In the distance, I could see the shimmering glow of the Grandview chocolate fountain. I was only 30 minutes into my shift, and as I looked at the dark windows of the stores, I realized that the mannequins weren't the only things watching. I stood there for a long time, staring at the fountain. My heart was still a frantic drum in my chest from the encounter with the mannequins. I kept telling myself it was a prank, a sophisticated, expensive corporate prank. Maybe the greetings to Santa was a voice-activated override for the hydraulics. It had to be. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I checked my watch. 12:15 a.m. The hunger hit me then. It wasn't just a growl. It was a sharp, biting cramp in my stomach. I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. A half-stale granola bar and tap water. Looking at that fountain, the smell was intoxicating. It didn't just smell like chocolate. It smelled like every warm memory I had. It smelled like the brownies my mother used to bake when I was 10. It smelled like a high-end bakery on a winter morning. I looked at the folded paper again. Rule 2. Do not eat the chocolate from the chocolate fountain. It's a fountain, for God's sake, I whispered. My voice was a dry rasp. Thousands of kids dip their fingers in this every day. It's probably the cleanest thing in this building. The temptation was a physical weight. I stepped closer to the marble basin. The liquid was dark, shimmering, and moved with the grace of molten silk. In the dim light, it looked beautiful, rich, life-giving. I looked around. No cameras were pointed directly at the basin. Miller was probably in the security hub, drinking his own coffee, laughing at the new guy who actually apologized to a piece of plastic. To hell with the rules, I muttered. I reached out. My index finger broke the surface of the liquid. It was cold. Surprising, biting cold. Like dipping your hand into an ice slushie. But the texture was perfect. I licked my finger. The sweetness lasted for a heartbeat. Then it died. It didn't just turn bitter. It turned to dust. 1 second I was tasting premium dark cocoa. The next, it felt like I had shoved a handful of cold fireplace soot into my mouth. My tongue went bone dry. My throat constricted as if I'd swallowed a cup of dry cement. I tried to spit, but nothing came out. My saliva was gone. Every time I breathed, the taste of burnt wood and charcoal filled my sinuses. It was grit, pure, abrasive grit that coated my teeth and the roof of my mouth. I fumbled for my water bottle. I unscrewed the cap and chugged. The water did nothing. I drank the whole bottle, but the sensation remained. It felt like I had spent an hour licking the inside of an old chimney. My mouth was full of the ash. The more I tried to swallow, the more I felt the dry, powdery texture scratching against my esophagus. God damn it, I wheezed. The words felt like they were being pushed through a layer of sand. I looked at the fountain. It didn't smell like brownies anymore. It smelled like a house fire. It smelled like everything I owned was burning to a crisp. I spun around. The figure was gone. The atrium was empty. The only sound was the glug, glug, glug of the fountain, which now sounded like someone choking on their own blood. I needed to wash my mouth out. I needed a real sink with real pressure. I remembered the restrooms. There was a set tucked right behind the giant Christmas tree in the north atrium. It was only 50 yards away. I started walking, my boots clicking rhythmically on the marble. With every step, I felt the ash in my mouth getting thicker. It was getting harder to breathe. The air in the mall felt heavier now, saturated with the scent of pine needles and something copper metallic. I saw the sign, restrooms. The neon light flickered, casting a pale blue glow over the corridor. I pulled the rule sheet from my pocket one more time. The paper felt hot in my hand. Rule 3. Do not use the toilets near the Christmas tree. I stared at the words. I could feel the grit on my tongue. I could feel the ash in my lungs. I have to wash my mouth, I croaked. I pushed the heavy wooden door open. I should have known. The mannequins were a warning. The ash was a punishment. But the restroom? The restroom was where the mall stopped playing games. I didn't look in the mirror yet. I just turned on the tap. The water came out steaming hot. I cupped my hands, desperate to flush the charcoal taste from my throat. That was when I looked up. The ash wouldn't leave. It was a physical presence now, a dry, suffocating layer of silt that seemed to be growing in the back of my throat. Every time I swallowed, it felt like I was gulping down a handful of crushed bone. My thirst was a screaming thing. I stood over the sink, the motion sensor faucet sputtering to life. The water was scalding. It hissed against the porcelain, sending up clouds of thick, opaque steam that quickly obscured the row of polished mirrors. I didn't care about the rules anymore. I didn't care about Miller or the $55 an hour. I just wanted to breathe without tasting a house fire. I splashed my face, eyes stinging from the heat. I needed to see. I reached out and wiped a clear streak through the condensation on the mirror. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It stopped. I saw him in the glass. I saw the way his chest heaved with a wet, rattling breath. I saw the eyes, small, yellow, and filled with a senseless, ancient hunger. I spun around, a scream tearing through the ash in my throat. My baton was out, my knuckles white as I prepared for the impact of the axe. The restroom was empty. I was alone. I could hear the blood thudding in my ears, a frantic, rhythmic pulse. My hands were shaking so hard, I nearly dropped my flashlight. "Not real," I wheezed, the ash scraping my windpipe. "Hallucination. The chocolate. It's a neurotoxin. It has to be." Then a new sound cut through the silence. The sound was heartbreaking. It was full of pain and abandonment. In the sterile, blue-lit silence of the bathroom, it sounded like a siren. My training took over. You don't ignore a crying child, not even in a place that makes the mannequins walk. I moved toward the last stall. The air grew colder with every step. The smell of pine and rot intensified, nearly masking the scent of the ash. I reached out, my fingers trembling as they touched the polished wood of the door. Is anyone in there?" I asked. The crying stopped instantly. I pushed the door open, slowly. I stared at the creature. It shouldn't have been there. It shouldn't have been that color. It looked like something that had been dipped in a vat of strawberry-scented blood. The calf shivered, its tiny hooves clicking against the tile. It didn't look like a miracle. It looked like a sacrifice. I didn't stay to find out why it was crying. I backed out of the stall, tripping over my own feet, and bolted for the exit. I slammed the restroom door shut and leaned against it, gasping for air. I saw my reflection in the glass. And standing right behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder in the reflection, was the bloody Santa. He was leaning down, his filth-clotted beard nearly touching my neck. The axe was raised high, catching the moonlight from the skylights. I spun around. Nothing. Empty air. The ash in my mouth felt like it was turning into embers. My throat was raw. I reached the security office and fumbled with the keys. I ducked inside and slammed the door, locking it with a frantic click. I didn't look at the mirrors in the office. I didn't look at the darkened computer screens. I knew he was there. I could feel the weight of the axe in the air. I sat at the desk, buried my face in my hands, and tried to count my heartbeats. "Just 3 hours," I whispered through the grit. 3 hours and I can leave. I didn't hear the door open, but I felt the draft. I looked at the rule sheet again. Rule 1, 2, and 3 were broken. I was a marked man. The ash was in my lungs now. I began to cough, a deep, rattling sound that filled the small room. I looked up at the security monitors, and that's when I saw the elves. The clock on the wall didn't seem to be moving right. The second hand would stutter, skip 3 beats, then sweep backward before resuming its march. Or maybe it was just my brain misfiring. The ash was no longer just a taste. It was a texture. It felt like my tongue had been replaced by a strip of dry, coarse sandpaper. Every time I swallowed, I felt the grit grinding against the back of my throat. It was the taste of a crematorium, dry, ancient, and utterly dead. I looked at the monitors. They were crawling with movement, small, jagged shapes darting through the shadows of some stores. At first, I thought they were rats. Then I saw the hats. Rule 4. If you see someone wandering around, don't react. The paper was damp with my sweat. I gripped it until the ink began to bleed. I knew I had to go out there. My rounds weren't optional. If I stayed in the office, the mall would come to me. I'd already seen the massive, gloved hand in the reflection of my office door. I knew the Axeman was waiting for me to become a stationary target. I stepped out into the concourse. The silence was gone. It had been replaced by a sound that made my teeth ache. A high-frequency vibration, a collective insectile hum that seemed to be coming from the very walls. I walked toward them. I didn't have a choice. The path to the south wing went right through the food court. I kept my eyes fixed on a point 10 feet ahead of me on the floor. I focused on the cracks in the tiles. I focused on the grit in my mouth. As I got closer, the humming grew louder. It wasn't a vocal sound. It was the sound of their bodies vibrating. I passed within 3 feet of the table. One of the elves hopped down. Its boots made a soft, wet squelch on the marble. I didn't stop. I didn't turn my head. I felt the cold. It wasn't the cold of the AC. It was the cold of a deep freeze. The elf began to walk beside me. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see it. It didn't have a face. Its head was a smooth, oval lump of leather, stitched together with thick, black twine. There were no eyes, no nose, just a jagged, horizontal seam where a mouth should be. "Elias," a voice whispered. It sounded like air escaping a punctured tire. "Elias, what's in the bag?" I didn't answer. I didn't look. I kept walking, my boots clicking a frantic, uneven rhythm. "The master wants to know if you've been good," the elf chirped. It began to skip around me, its movements blurred and unnatural, like a film with missing frames. "You ate the treat. You looked at the girls. You used the forbidden room." The vibration intensified. It felt like my brain was being shaken inside my skull. The ash in my mouth suddenly flared with heat, as if the embers had been fanned. I coughed, a cloud of gray dust puffing from my lips. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg for a glass of water. But Rule 4 was my only armor. I reached the great hall near the entrance. The elf stopped. It stood in the center of the hallway, its head tilting at a 90-degree angle. "You're a boring toy, Elias," the elf whispered. "But you'll look beautiful on the tree." The humming stopped. The vibration ceased. The mall went dead silent again. I didn't look back. I didn't check to see if it was gone. I just kept walking until I reached the south wing, where the air was even colder and the smell of rot was almost unbearable. I was broken. My body was a hollow shell filled with soot and fear. I looked at the monitors, but my vision was swimming. The black and white screens were just a blur of gray static and shadows. I had made it through the elves. I had survived the Mirror Man. But the exhaustion was a physical weight now. It felt like the mall was pressing its massive concrete hands onto my shoulders, pushing me down into the chair. Just an hour, I wheezed. My voice was gone. I sounded like a ghost. 1 hour, then the sun, then Jack's, then my $55. I looked at the rule sheet on the desk. The fourth rule was clear, but there was something below it. A blank space, a smudge of ink that seemed to be growing. I leaned forward, trying to read it. My head felt so heavy. Just a second, I thought. I'll just rest my neck for a second. I won't close my eyes. I'll just, The silence swallowed me. And in the darkness, I didn't hear the clock stop. I didn't hear the mall's heart start to beat again. I didn't wake up to the sun. I didn't wake up to the sound of Miller's keys or the morning cleaning crew's chatter. I woke up to the weight of the silence. My neck was stiff, locked in a painful crook from sleeping in the chair. My mouth, the ash was gone. My tongue felt wet, normal, and strangely sweet. I gasped for air, expecting to choke on charcoal dust, but the air was clean. It tasted like expensive sandalwood and ozone. I made it, I whispered. My voice was a croak, but it was mine. I looked at the window of the security office, expecting to see the first gray fingers of dawn creeping over the parking lot. My stomach dropped into my shoes. The lot wasn't empty. It was exactly as it had been when I arrived for my shift. I looked at the analog clock on the wall. 10 p.m. No, I breathed. No, the battery died. It's a coincidence. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket. The screen lit up, blinding me for a second. Tuesday, December 23rd, 10 p.m. The world tilted. I felt a surge of vertigo so strong I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from sliding onto the floor. I looked at my hands. They were shaking, but they looked different. The skin was thinner. The liver spots I'd had on my knuckles were darker, more numerous. My wedding ring, which had always been a tight fit, slid loosely down my finger. I reached for the rule sheet. Rule 5. Do not fall asleep under any circumstances. Underneath, in a script that looked like it had been scratched into the paper with a needle, were 3 words. The debt restarts. I didn't just lose a night. The mall doesn't want a guard. It wants a battery. Every time I close my eyes, it resets the clock and keeps the change. It takes the hours I slept and turns them into years off my life, keeping me trapped in the same December 23rd over and over until there's nothing left of me but a hollowed-out husk to be stuffed into a green felt suit. The previous guy didn't quit. He just finally ran out of time. I can't leave. I tried the doors. They're locked from the outside with a strength that defies physics. I can't break the glass. It's harder than diamond. I have to do the round. I have to apologize to the plastic. I have to taste the ash. I have to face the axe in the mirror. And most importantly, I have to stay awake. If you're listening to this, if you're looking for work and a friend calls you about a golden opportunity at a place that seems too good to be true, hang up. Stay in your apartment. Eat the stale noodles. Sit in the dark. Because once the mall punches your time card, the shift never ends. And I'm so tired.